Alright, so it's another beautiful morning here in the lower mainland of Vancouver. Beautiful morning. As you can see, it's amazing outside. That is tropical weather for you. Can't get better than that. Well guys, I'm going to take a few minutes here to quickly clean up the garage before I start my day. But today's video is going to be specifically based around the headlight cleaning and restoration. I do get quite a fair amount of customers who ask me what my process is. So this video is going to be based around sharing my step-by-step on how to do it. The supplies that I use for doing my headlights. Basically starting from the simplest is a spray bottle for just water, some glass cleaner, a polisher or a buffer, a drill with an attachment so that I can use for sanding. Not necessary though, you can do it by hand, but you would definitely want something that you could use the buffer with. Masking tape to tape off the body of the car, rubbing alcohol, and this is just a good old-fashioned 70%, whatever. You can use 90%. This here is a concoction of distilled water, rubbing alcohol, and then wax remover from Duplay. A compound or cutting pad with a cutting compound, a polishing pad with a polish. And I got this within the Megiuar's kit, and really this is like the staple of my work. Like I just buy that and use that, because here's your 1000 grit. It's pretty much worn down. It's getting close to replacing time. That's actually why I bought a new one. And then then you come with the sponge applicator, your UV clear coat, your polish. It does have that little buffer wheel, but I typically just throw it in the garbage because I hate them. They're useless. And then some lint-free chem wipes or lint-free wipes, and I use that on the applicator, and I tape it just like that, boom. And then I put the UV clear coat on that, and that's how I apply it. I do that because I don't like lint, but that is my setup for doing headlights. Now I want to take note that just because I have all those tools does not mean that I may or may not use every one of those tools during the process. As you see here, in fact, there's a few of those things I won't use during this process, but step one is to tape off the paint around light. And once you're done taping it off, you then go ahead and do a quick cleaning of the light with your Windex. Here I'm spraying on a solution of water with an ounce of Windex and an ounce of alcohol in it. This actually helps speed up the cleaning process with the 1000 grit paper. It just kind of helps loosen up the oxidation and dirt a little bit faster than just wet sanding it. And this process here, we are starting off with the 1000 paper. You can actually do this by hand. You can do it by drill here. You can even do it by a rotary buffer if you have one. And it's kind of hard to see right now, but I'm constantly spraying that water solution on the lights to keep the lights wet. The last thing you want is to let the lights get dry. You do not want them to dry up. And I'll even rinse off that sanding disc every once in a while. I'll take a second just to give it a quick squirt, rinse it off. And in the process of doing this, what you're doing is you're helping to rinse off from the light any of the dirt and oxidation and grime that you've sanded off. And then when rinsing it off helps remove it, but it prevents also from causing deeper gouges in the light as well. Again, I try to keep the light and the sanding paper typically as wet as I can, and I continually do a rinse off with it as well. So as I'm working, you can see I have this spray bottle in my hand, and I typically try to rinse and go and clean at the same time. Alright, now that I'm finished using the drill to get the majority of it off, I removed the sanding paper from the drill to work on the more intricate, tighter areas where the hardened applicator won't get into. And once I'm done attacking those areas with a sandpaper, before I move on to the 3000 grit paper, I do a rinse and wipe off. I want to remove any of the particles from either the sanding paper or the dirt and oxidation that was sanded off from the light, so that when the 3000 goes on, it's not dragging coarse dirt, grime, and sanding particles across the light. I want the 3000 to be as clean as possible against the light. And even as I'm working on it, even though I'm not using the drill as a rotary fashion on this, I still try to maintain that wetness to keep it fresh and wet. And you can see already that there's already a huge change at this point already just from using that 3000. And this is just a design method to help reduce the sanding marks from the 1000. And what you want to do is, if you go over the light with a rotary sander, you should essentially go over it with a rotary sander on the next one, and you want to usually do one pass more. So on this, I spend an extra 5 minutes doing some extra sanding with the 1000 or the 3000 paper, just to make sure I remove all the 3000 sanding marks. Alright, and now that I'm done with the 3000 paper, I will rinse off and remove any sanding residue that was from the 3000 grit paper. And I do this cleaning cycle in between every step. I want to make sure that I remove whatever was left on from the last one. And now I'm using my Megiuar's M105 compound on my Lake Country yellow heavy cutting pad. And I got this setting on the drill as number 2. It's high, it's fast, and I'm trying to move at a steady pace, but at a quick pace too. I'm not leaving the drill in one spot for too long. I do not want to heat the lens up to the point where it starts to actually get off the burn marks from the friction within the rotary. And this is a 4-inch buffing pad on a 3.5-inch buffing wheel. Just take note that I'm not holding the drill steady. I'm not letting it sit in one location for more than 2-3 seconds at a time. Not even that in most cases. You don't want the heat from the friction of the rotary to set in that light and cause burn marks. And now that I'm done with the cutting compound, I want to remove all that residue. So now I'm using the homemade IPA, which has alcohol in it, distilled water, and it also has Dupal's wax remover. And all I'm doing is just cleaning the light, removing any of that cutting compound residue off of it. So now we're moving on to the finishing pad or polishing pad. This one is a Chemical Guys 4-inch polishing pad on a 3.5-inch buffing wheel. I'm using the Megiuar's polisher that comes within the Megiuar's Headlight heavy duty kit. Again, I have the setting on the drill set for number 2, and I'm going at a steady pace. I'm going a little bit slower than I would be when I was doing the cutting compound, but not by much. And after doing about 3 or 4 passes, I go to begin to remove all the residue from the polishing. And now after I'm done removing the polishing residue, I want to make sure I get it nice and clean, as clean as possible, before I get to the final step, and that's applying the UV clear coat. Again, I have the lint-free tissue wrapped around and taped to the sponge applicator that comes in the kit. Now you don't need this, it's just my OCD. I've used that sponge and I've found that it's left little streaks behind. I find that using this lint-free chem wipe doesn't leave streaks. And I prefer to put 2 applications, so I put 1 coating on, wait 5 minutes, and then do a second coating. And alright, so now that we're done the first light, we hop over to the second light, and the second light isn't nearly as bad as the first one, so it won't take as long. I have to do the same steps, but half the amount of effort. So here you see me going on. I'm starting with the 1000 grit sandpaper, and I'm soaking the light, being pretty liberal with it, trying to keep the light as wet as possible so that I don't increase any friction, don't cause any burns, and I don't cause any extra deep sanding marks from letting the sanding grit and residue build up on the light. Whenever possible, I try to rinse the light off, make sure I get as much of that sanding residue off the light. And already I'm done with the rotary part. I'm going to move on to the hand part, where I'm getting into the more intricate sections where the drill won't reach with that hardened bit on it. And again, whenever I finish one phase of the process, I want to rinse and clean the light before I move on to the next phase. You don't want any of this sanding residue from one sanding stage to the next sanding stage to transfer. You run the risk of causing deeper grooves and or wrecking the sandpaper on the other grit. So transferring a 1000 sanding residue over to a 3000 grit sanding residue can contaminate that disc. You don't want that to happen because it could also wreck the surface that you're working on. And now that I'm done with the 3000, I'm doing the cleaning and prepping for the compound cut. Again, I'm using a 4-inch cutting pad with Megiuar's M105 cutting compound. And I know earlier in the video I said it was a Lake Country pad, but no, this is actually a Chemical Guys 4-inch cutting wheel. Chemical Guys just had a dealer open up in our area called the Detail Shop Langley, and so I went in there and decided to pick up a few of these pads to give them a try. Typically I use Lake Country for my cutting pads, but since now I have a Chemical Guys rep nearby, I said I would give it a try, and I'm actually pretty impressed with the pads. Now that I'm done with the cutting pad, I'm cleaning the light off, getting all that residue off, and getting ready for the polishing stage. And this is again another Chemical Guys polishing finishing pad with the polish that comes within the Megiuar's Headlight restoration kit. You can probably see in the background there's quite a few customers coming and going. A couple of people who have come by to watch the process to see how it's done. I typically do have about 3 or 4 customers who will show up just to see the process because they have a hard time believing that it's even possible. And so I invite them to come by and see the process themselves and give them a chance to see what it's like. And then I typically find that it helps increase more of a customer awareness. And I have no problem taking the time to even teach them how to do it while they're there. As much as I want a paying customer, I also want people to be self-sufficient and self-sustaining. So if I can teach someone and they can learn and do it on their own, then awesome. That's one more person who's able to take care of themselves in this world. Okay, now that I'm done with the polishing, clean the light, get the residue off there, and then take the time to apply the clear coat. Again, I always do 2 coats. I wait 5 minutes between coats. And there you go, there's the finished product. That is using the Megiuar's kit with a few modifications. You don't have to use the materials I do. A lot of people will show you can do this with just a buffing polisher. A lot of people will show you can do this with a polisher and a couple pads and some cutting compound and some polishing. It's depending on what you do and how you like it. This is my method. This is how I like it. This is the results I get. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoy. Please make sure you leave some comments, hit a thumbs up.
Don't forget to subscribe.
She's gonna take that. Or will you fight back?